Welcome to Thought Leaders, featuring interviews with some of the best minds in the industry. Today's special guest is popular platform speaker and trial lawyer, Ilya Lirma. Hello everyone, I'm Steve Savant, syndicated financial columnist and talk show host. In this segment, we're talking about why client engagement letters is an advisor's first line of defense, all from Ilya's best practices taken from her popular keynote addresses and seminars. Well, Ilya, I've had you on before.
Yes.
And people always ask me, Steve, why do you have her on the show? Because she's the enemy, you know? But really, last time we recorded, we talked about many of these subjects because you're helping us in best practices to bring a line of defense so that we really, if we go to arbitration, if we go to court, we're actually going to have real reasons, defensible positions. And I want you to tell me why everybody's practice, whether you're a registered investment advisor, whether you're a securities license, or whether you're an insurance professional, why should we use engagement letters with clients?
Well, there's professional reasons that you have them that are discussed in the course of your professional education seminars, et cetera. But as far as protecting yourself from litigation, you want to be able to look at how a trial attorney is actually going to be looking at information. One of the most important things to remember is that cases aren't really about truth, they're about evidence. And whether or not that's a fault of the legal system, you can kind of debate back and forth. But you're going to be in charge of the evidence, and that client engagement letter is going to be one of the key pieces of information that's going to be reviewed by any initial trial attorney who's investigating whether or not to pursue a claim against you.
Well, the last time I had you on, and I had another attorney on as well, I kind of changed my way of engagement letters to kind of list out my obligation to the client point by point, a kind of a talking point. And I also did the same thing for the client, kind of their obligation, what I'm looking to them. When you see that, is that, besides those components, which I think are pretty good and obvious, what other components should I add into an engagement letter to be part of my protocol? In other words, it's going to be in every one I do.
Well, you want to make sure that with your client engagement letter that it defines who the client is. Are you talking about this one individual? Are you representing the family? Are you looking to extended family members such as grandchildren, something like that? The scope of your presentation is going to be represented in that client letter as well. You want to be able to list out and define in terms the time that you're actually looking at doing investments for this one particular individual or this family. And so the client letter should actually list that out. The engagement letter should define all of those things by scope. And then additionally, if you know ahead of time whether or not your engagement is going to possibly involve any kinds of transactions that may be construed as self-dealing possibly, or maybe some conflict of interest, you want to make sure that those things as well are documented in your initial engagement letter.
Now, when I'm thinking about it, I'm thinking many times insurance professionals are qualified plans, they have joint ownership, they have beneficiaries. So when you say scope, I was just thinking when you said, well, I thought I was just talking to the husband and the wife, but there's children involved in beneficiary issues. There's punt positions on contingent beneficiaries in case something happens to the primary beneficiary. Am I actually trying to cite that in my upfront engagement letter? Anything I'm going to touch or affect in the family needs to be listed, maybe?
Well, in your general form engagement letter, possibly not. But for instance, if you're dealing with somebody who may be elderly or may have some immediate health issues, and you have those immediate concerns about what happens to beneficiaries or subsequent family planning, you need to be able to have language that's readily available that you can insert into your standard form engagement letter. And that's going to be necessary pretty much across the board if there's significant life events that may be affecting the person that you're representing.
Well, you just brought up a whole other point, which is I'm dealing with people. Do I have a person that's competent? You know, I'm dealing with a senior. Does he have a representative or she have a representative in the room, family or attorney or CPA in the room while we're discussing financial matters? So I think we have tests in our business where we have the clock test. Can they make actually cogent answers? What time is it? How do you talk about time? And we show them different testing to make sure that we're dealing with a cognitive person. But sounds like you're suggesting a little bit more than that.
Well, it is important to know who is your client because, as you know, a lot of people have different objectives in terms of what their financial objectives are. And you don't want to have misalignment in those objectives. So who's calling the shots? Whose instructions are you to be following if the person you think is your client is also getting weighed in on by other family members, spouses, children, etc. And so you want to be very clear about where your instructions are supposed to be coming from. Let's say, for instance, your client ends up in the hospital, your principal ends up in the hospital, and there's concerns from family members, et cetera, about what's going to happen. You want to make sure kind of ahead of time that you've got some kind of contingency plan in place so that you can deal with those questions and those concerns. So again, having a standard form engagement letter is important, but that's not the be-all, end-all. You have to be able to anticipate, as an expert in your field, what problems may arise and sort of train yourself to think in terms of worst-case scenarios.
Well, for more information on how an engagement letter is a protection protocol for your practice, just click on the landing page address in the video description. We'll be right back with more from Elia Learning.
This is your website. Few people visit, and if it isn't attracting new visitors, it's not doing its job. Now you can drive more visitors to your website through dynamic content and email marketing with Creative One's Social Media Elite. Capture quality leads faster and easier. Engage your visitors with informative articles and videos to boost your online credibility. Plus, stay connected with existing clients and earn more referrals. All content is customized for you. It's time to introduce your website to the world. Call your Creative One sales team at 800-992-2642 or visit us online at creativeone.com.
In this segment, we're talking about having clients sign waivers for recommendations that they don't take. Now, Elia, I make a lot of recommendations, and my clients go, well, not now, or maybe not ever, okay? And I'm wondering, I did make this recommendation, and I don't want to be going to arbitration a couple years from now saying he didn't address this or he didn't say it. I did say this. So how important do you think it is when I'm discussing a recommendation and my client decides not to take it or follow through, to get a waiver or some kind of document that states that?
I once received some information about communication, and that is the most dangerous thing about it, is the illusion that it has occurred. And so what you may be taking as a recommendation, your principal on the other side of the desk might be just receiving as some suggestions, or maybe something that might benefit you more financially. And so that's why documentation becomes so important. We don't do it as often as we should. But the fact of the matter is, especially when you feel strongly about something, that this is a particular client you feel a product would be ideally suited for because of, again, advanced age, possibly something like that may be well suited to this individual, and they don't want to take your advice. It's in those situations that you want to make just a small note, even follow it up with a letter to the client that basically says, I've made these recommendations, you've opted to pursue course B instead, but these are your alternatives, and if something changes, let me know. Right there, your duty to document the conversation has been satisfied.
No, I don't necessarily have to then go to a full waiver. I listen to my recommendation and say, please sign what you won't sign.
Absolutely, absolutely. And when you depart from recommendations that you would ordinarily make is another time that you want to think about getting a client letter out. You may even want to consider when you send that letter out, having the client kind of initial off and return the letter to you. So not only do you have the documentation from your file, you have an acknowledgement by the client. It doesn't have to be a full-blown waiver, but at least you have some proof, some evidence that you made this recommendation to the principal and they, for whatever reason, went ahead with their an alternative course.
In our business, I've noticed that we have a lot of trouble sometimes with long-term care. Did we install the policy or did we not install the policy? If we didn't install the policy, the odds are high that it was too expensive for the client at the time that we actually offered it. Then down the road, things happen. And all of a sudden, we're in a nursing home or we're doing assisted living at home. And the beneficiary, the children generally, come back and say, why didn't you offer it? Well, I said I did offer it. But at the time, it was too expensive. And this is one of those times where she was younger, in her 60s, but now we're talking in her 70s, and she doesn't really remember what I talked about 8 years ago. So when you're talking about writing a letter, for confirm, and then getting it back initialed from the client. I think that's huge to protect us, because that one area I just told you about is huge in arbitration.
Right, and that brings up two interesting points. And the first one is that you have to remember that if you're in the context of litigation, your conduct is going to be examined post hoc. That means the evidence is in, the doors are closed. Everybody's going to be looking at what you did 5, 10 years previously and the history that you've had with this particular principal. But you're going to want to be able to explain away a lot of that evidence and develop conversations that aren't documented in the file. So you need to be sure that when it is that you're anticipating, again, these worst case scenarios, that you are documenting those conversations. It's particularly important. And then the second aspect is the fact that you want to have a reevaluation, a period of time. You don't want to go 10 years without asking the client again, because you may have documented that conversation when the client was in their 60s, but what about in their 70s? All of a sudden, advanced age has made a significant leap in that 10 years.
Well, I think this is important. That's why in our standard protocol should be an annual review. So, I mean, we should be doing that anyways. And I'm thinking about another episode here where I have two advisors. I don't have the clients, all their money side of their equation. I may have other places where I'm their fiduciary, I'm their advisor. So all of a sudden I have two advisors working with maybe the same money, not even knowing it, to make sure that we're on the same page and actually acknowledge it. I've learned to put in my engagement letter, is there anybody else involved in your finances, and may I have their contact information? And they're going to be copied on everything I do.
Right, and that's a very prudent course, and it may also be a prudent course to ask about family members who may be contingent decision makers in the event of ill health of your principal.
Well, when I'm thinking about that's a huge issue, because, hey, if I'm hospitalized, who's going to take over? If I have any kind of dementia, if I have early Alzheimer's, who's going to be the person? I need to make that call today, while I have the cognizance to be able to do that. When we come back in our following series, we're going to touch a little more on some of this, because this is really helpful. And I think, again, we're trying to talk about best practices. For more information on waiver documents and other best practices, just click on the landing page address in the video description. And for more information on our shows, seminars, and workshops, just follow us on social media or visit us out on our website. I'm Steve Savant. We'll see you next time on Thought Leaders. And remember, keep thinking outside the box.